Good.
Why did I start collecting? It's one of those things where you get a computer and you've used it for so long, you kind of develop a relationship with it. It's kind of hard to get rid of it, so it just stays there when you get a new one. So they accumulate. I think in the beginning they would pass to other family members, but then they would upgrade, and those computers that were passed to them come back to me, because what else are they going to do with them? So I started gathering them. But at some point, largely with eBay, the rise of eBay, you could get these computers, any and all of them, for pennies on the dollar. And so I started looking at computers that I lusted after, because whenever I got a new computer, I could only get the most expensive Macintosh, and there were all these models that were thousands of dollars more, but now you can get them for cheap. So I just started saying, well, I'll get this one that I used to enjoy looking after, or this one, and then they just kept coming. Well, I started with the Apple II.
Okay.
If you go to the Mac, so my first Mac...
No, go ahead and start with that.
Right.
I started with the Apple II and go from there.
Okay. We got our first home computer, was an Apple IIe to be specific, when I was, I guess, in the 7th grade, 8th grade, something like that. So my dad brought it home, and that sort of just started it off. So we used the Apple IIe for many years, and eventually, the Mac came out. Of course, I didn't have one for many years. It was until the late 80s, going to college, couldn't take the Apple IIe away from the family, so I had to get a new Mac. And at the time, the Mac Plus was sort of the standard model, and so got the Mac Plus and took that off to college with me. Sort of the love affair, if you will, with Apple began with the Apple IIe, just because of what it allowed you to do, particularly with school. I mean, we had Apple IIs in high school where I lived, so we got an introduction to that. But then to have one at home, be able to use it for your school projects and all the things, and not at that time, not everybody had the luxury of having a computer at home, and so to have one and to be able to produce reports and do things that other kids couldn't do kind of gave you a step up. So you kind of depended on it. You had to create a relationship with this computer, because, I mean, the Apple IIs, while they were user-friendly, weren't as robust as computers are today. So that led to the Mac, and again, Apple has a way of sort of, through how they express the technology, of getting you to develop this relationship with this computer. The Apple computers, for me anyway, I mean, there are hobbyists that like to tinker and build and tear things apart. I think from the very beginning, I just wanted to get things done. I wanted this tool that accelerated whatever I was doing. And the Apple II did that for me, and the Mac did that even to greater extent, right? So for me, it just became this thing, I mean, Steve Jobs said, right, it was like a bicycle for the mind, right, where you would use this tool, and it just, everything you could do better, you could do it faster, more impressive. So whatever that might be, I mean, even to this day. Let's see if I can recall. So we started with the Apple IIe, went to the Plus, and actually I only had the Plus a short while before my parents wanted that Plus at their house. So I got an SE actually fairly quickly after that. That SE carried to college. Coming out of college, I think the next computer was I want to say it was a Centris 610. And the Centris 610 led to my first Power PC Mac, the 6100 DOS PC with the DOS card in it. After that, it was a beige G3 desktop. Now, all these computers I still have in here. Beige G3 desktop, followed by an iMac G4, like the one behind me. And let's see, after that, there was the G5 tower, the liquid cooling, the dual G5 monster, which is sitting behind me too, still not leaking, knock on wood. And then it became just a series of iMacs. The iMacs became so powerful that you could, where the first G5, the white slabs to the aluminums, and that's currently what I have on my desk. And then of course, and then also I wound up getting notebooks on the side. So the iBook G3 graphite, and a later iBook G4, and then started getting MacBook Pros. So while I started accumulating my own computers, I then started looking to eBay, buying computers I was looking after. But at the same time, I was kind of got interested in collectibles. Of course, when Steve Jobs came back, among the many changes he did was to phase out the 6-color Apple logo. And I always had a fondness for the 6-color Apple logo because that's what I grew up on. And so seeking out things that bore that logo, whether it be the computer themselves or t-shirts or hats or mugs or posters or whatever, I kind of got into that. So a lot of the things that I wound up collecting were motivated by sort of the relive and preserve the 6-color Apple logo and everything that Apple stuck that on. Well, beyond being significant for me, the Macintosh was obviously very empowering, but it's also historically significant, being the first. The Macintosh wound up being the first, at least within grasp, way of bringing home a graphical user interface in a desktop computer. It sort of ushered in this whole idea of getting us away from the command line and getting us to a keyboard and mouse and introducing that whole concept to the world. And as a result, that's what everybody does today. Of course, touch screens are kind of replacing that, and mice went to trackpads and all this. But the graphical user interface of the very first Mac, if you look at that today, it's pretty recognizable. It's what exists on most desktops today. Mm-hmm. So it changed everything. I mean, that was a milestone event in computing history. I think it's more and more difficult for the Mac to stand out. The things that used to distinguish the Mac from other operating systems, say Windows, for example, those have slowly eroded away, like the ideas of compatibility and stability and security. You could argue either way whether the Mac is more secure or more usable or more stable or all this. A lot of it winds up being sort of a look and feel thing, ironically, that there's a design elegance to the Macintosh, not just the hardware, but the user interface itself. And the idea that Apple still controls the whole thing, right? There's still no pointing fingers at what's at fault here. Is it the hardware? Is it the software? Well, Apple will take care of all of that. So there's still some value in that vertical integration with the computing platform. But everything else, I mean, if you want to argue about security or usability or reliability, those are probably harder arguments to win for the Mac these days. It just comes down to personal preference for the most part. Much like the Mac still stands apart from other computers in terms of design, obviously industrial design, fit and finish, quality materials, and then the interface and all the aesthetics. Apple carries that forward even with the iPad Pro, for example, the latest version of the iPad Pro, and they're constantly pushing sort of this the transparency of the device and the experience. And so with the iPad Pro, you've seen, just like with the iPhones, the screen continues to push the outer edges until the point where it's all screen, right? And that's, of course, probably what they wanted in the beginning, but the technology is now really being able to fulfill those dreams. So the latest iPad Pro, it almost becomes like the hardware's not even there, right? It's all the software interface. There are certainly eras of Apple's history that I'm not fond of. I mean, I'm very fond of the origin, the mid '80s to the early '90s, right, when the Mac is first introducing these concepts and coming on strong and establishing, new apps are flooding in, lots of development going on. Been a fan of everything since Steve Jobs has come back, right? Lots of landmark products, the original iMac, and of course what Johnny Ive has done with the design. There was that middle period, the dark days, right, where we nearly lost Apple. That I'm not fond of. I remember those dark days, and where it seemed like there were very few of us that were still using Macs because of the product confusion, The operating system was sort of not advancing at the pace that it really needed to. So there was a lot of negatives about that period in time. I can remember the first time I saw a Lisa computer, and I was 12 at a computer show in Wichita, Kansas. Back when they had computer shows, right? And it was, for a kid who'd only really had experience with Apple IIs and go to this computer show, and it's littered with vendors with all different kinds of computers. I mean, this is back in the day when, there were dozens and dozens of different manufacturers that were cranking out examples. And I can remember, going around and collecting the brochures for the Epsons and the K-Pros and the whatever. And then coming to this booth, and these people were gathered around looking at this thing, and I walked up to it. And that was the first time I'd ever laid eyes or even heard about, because, in those days you didn't have the internet, you didn't really know what was going on in the computer industry, but first time I ever seen a Lisa in person being demoed there. And, it was jaw-dropping. The screen, the things that they were doing, I'm not even sure I could properly gather it all in, when you've never been exposed to something like that. And the guy said, "Hey, why don't you give it a try?" And I was so petrified, I said, no, that's okay, I'm fine. And I just kind of watched. But that was shocking to see that for the first time.
Mm-hmm.
The Lisa is significant because it sort of paved the way for the Mac, right? While many regard it as a failure, sort of a misstep, it was the Mac that kind of forced it out. But if it weren't for the Lisa, there wouldn't have been any Mac, right? The Mac was sort of almost lessons learned of the Lisa. How can we make Lisa cheaper? And to make it cheaper, we have to make it simple, and therefore we could, do things more efficiently, and really force the team to kind of take the idea of the Lisa, but implement it in a much more efficient way. So the Lisa's super huge, important for those reasons, and it's really
because I can edit that first part.
If it weren't for the Lisa, there would be no Macintosh. So it's really Lisa that was the computer. Lisa was the father of the Mac, not Steve Jobs, who they say is the father of the Mac. And well, as it turns out, Steve Jobs was the father of Lisa. Actually, it would be Lisa would then be the mother of the Macintosh, right? If you say Lisa. And it turns out because Steve Jobs is the father of Lisa, both the computer and his daughter. That's another story.
And that's perfect. That was good.
Yeah. So I guess a lot of popular opinion, not necessarily being correct, is that Apple stole the GUI and all these ideas from Xerox PARC, but the way the story actually went is that they were invited there. They entered an agreement so that Apple could use the things that they saw there. So that's the furthest thing from the truth. It's kind of like the story that Bill Gates bailed out Apple when Steve Jobs returned. That's not really true either. That was, again, an agreement where both parties would benefit, and it was not a bailout situation. So those are one of the popular myths of Apple history, is that Apple just stole everything. That's not true. And even those things, the ideas that Apple came away with from Xerox PARC, which were huge. I mean, these were significant advances that were going on in this laboratory that Xerox was running. They still had to take those ideas and refine them, simplify in many cases for consumers. So they got kind of the kernel of the ideas from Xerox PARC, but then had to refine them. So taking from a 3-button to a 1-button mouse, for example, it was just 3 buttons would be too complicated for somebody that was using the mouse for the first time. So there are all these little ideas, the way the menus were done and that kind of thing, that really took Apple, sort of this outside view of this laboratory prototype, to say, okay, how could we implement this more efficiently on lower cost hardware? How can we make it more accessible to a new computer user? Yeah. Most users, you're designing the computer not for power users, and power users went out and bought their third-party mice and whatever. That was always a thing too. You know, in the early days when you're saying Mac versus PC, well, Mac only has one button. It's like, have as many buttons as you want. You know, you're not limited. Yeah, it ships with a one-button mouse because 95% that's what they need. Of course, it's well known that Steve Jobs was on the Lisa team and then left to sort of take over the Macintosh team. There's an obvious relationship between the two designs, right? The graphical user interface, the keyboard, the mouse. And it's well known that the Macintosh project, as conceived by Jeff Raskin, was not anything really like the Macintosh became. So there is a common thread, and that's Steve Jobs. So obviously he took the lessons learned, right, from the Lisa team and went to the Macintosh and decided, okay, I'm going to use this talent over here and realize my dream, possibly what he was trying to do on the Lisa team, got him kicked out. You know, Steve Jobs, it's well known, he was very competitive, very protective of his interests, his projects. And at Apple, the way it was structured was, it was structured for that sort of competition. You know, the Apple II team, the Lisa team, and the Mac team. You know, the Mac team flew the pirate flag, right? So I would be surprised if Steve Jobs, as a founder of the company, who has, you know, some influence, actually use whatever influence he can to promote the Macintosh above these other teams. And I mean, as it turns out, we look at the finished product, and at the time, who's to blame him? I mean, that was the star, right? Mm-hmm. The Lisa, while innovative and groundbreaking, was also hugely expensive and not really going anywhere fast. And the Apple II was becoming a dinosaur. There were patches and whatever to kind of modernize it, but as we all know, the Apple II was fading away. So why wouldn't he go out of his way to push the Macintosh to sort of win the computer war within Apple? But that also speaks to his personality. I mean, I see that.
He was all in.
He's all in, but you need that to push something forward. You need to break with the past. I mean, when Steve Jobs came back, he still had that same mentality. You know, I don't care if everybody uses a floppy drive. That is not the future. We're cutting out the floppy drive. Mm-hmm. And example after example, I don't care if the printer business makes X%. That's not part of what we want to do, so we're going to get rid of that. I don't care if people love their Newtons. It's not making money, and that's not part of what I want to do, so it's gone. So, you know, he just made those decisions.
Oh, you're comfortable?
I think Apple probably should have killed the Lisa earlier than they did. The Macintosh XL rebranding was sort of a last gasp, but this all speaks to how they were organized. They used to have this Lisa team that was sort of fighting for survival, right? And so they were going to do anything they could to extend the life of the Lisa until eventually at the top levels nothing could be done. The things that distinguished Lisa from the Mac, there wasn't a lot there, right? Slightly bigger screen, they had a different office environment, and then they brought down the price, but really they were probably just frustrating old Lisa users that had paid the original price and were sticking with the platform. This idea that there was just a variant of essentially the same ideas, and now with increasingly less software available than the competing Macintosh. This idea that this one is a business one and this one is the personal computer just sort of melted away, right? When people could do business on a Mac, it really didn't mean that you needed to have this Lisa. What's interesting in the collecting community, things are collectible. Obviously, if people want them. People want them because the combination is usually of rarity and significance. And because, well, you're doing a documentary on Lisa, there's obviously significance there. And Lisa had a short lifespan, so they are rare. Not many of them sold because, hey, at $10,000 when they came out, who could afford one, right? And it's long enough ago that how many of these survived and what kind of conditions. So they are sought after now, and collectors really go after them. I was able to pick up a Lisa II fairly inexpensively about 15 years ago. But Lisa's today, especially working Lisa 1 computers, I think an auction closed recently for $50,000. So that puts the Lisa as probably the second most valuable Apple computer after the first Apple computer, which was just the breadboard, right? The Apple I that we call it now.